Hello and welcome to the Hometown Church Podcast, a podcast where we're talking all things Jesus, Christianity, the Bible, and much, much more. My name is jroskamp, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Pastor Deacon Ailes.
Hello.
And today we have a special guest with us, Pastor Brent Knox.
Hello. Nice to be here.
All right, nice to have you. What do we got on deck for today, Deacon?
Yeah, well, a few weeks ago, we finished up going through a sermon series called Deeper Still. And of course, with that, we are going through these spiritual disciplines and how they can take us to the next level in our relationship with God. And today, we wanted to go a little bit more in depth on some of the things that we covered in that series. That's why we have Brent on. And we want to talk a little bit about how we've implemented some of these disciplines into our lives, and we're going to go over tips on getting started, where to go next, and like Jesse said, we have Brent Knox, joining us today.
Wow.
To talk through some of that. How are you doing today, Brent?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I had a great quiet time this morning.
Oh.
Talking about spiritual disciplines.
Perfect.
Prayed through Psalm 17, let it script in my worship, and then I read about Jeremiah selling a piece of land that was a waste of money, and how he complained to God about it. So great quiet time today. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you're already doing it then. Great. Awesome.
Got the spiritual disciplines down.
Yeah, so let's get started.
Yeah,
let's dive in.
Yeah, let's get going. First question, Brent. I know when giving a sermon, oftentimes there's a lot of things that get covered and talked about, and a lot of things that need to be left out because we only have a limited time to talk about those things. And I'm sure there's plenty of things that you'd like to go deeper on. The thing I'm most curious from this last sermon series is the survey that you talked about in your last message. I'd like to just hear a little bit more about that survey. What was that survey all about? Who conducted it? How many churches were involved? And what was the goal of the survey?
Yeah, those are all good questions. The survey was originally conceived and conducted by a big church in the Chicago area, Willow Creek Community Church. And at the time, they were interested in this question: are our people growing? Because spiritual leaders have this sense that, hey, if more people just come to my activities, all the events that we have in the church, then our people must be growing. And they began to suspect that maybe that's not quite the case. Maybe that there's a difference between the people who are coming into the doors, and a difference between that and whether they're really growing or not. And, listen, all of us leaders, we have a bias. If more people come in the door, yeah, hallelujah. And I admit, I like seeing people come in the door. But does that mean that they're growing? And that was really the original intent of the survey, is to find out, are our people really growing, or are they just busy with spiritual activities? And so that was the point of it. A very extensive survey was designed by people who are really skilled in that area. They started first with their church, then it spread to at least 1,000 churches with 250,000 people. And the hometown Bloomington participated in that survey. We did it twice, actually, to try to get a sense of where we were at and whether there was a spiritual movement with our people. And that's kind of the background of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really extensive survey. As someone who has a background in UX design and surveys and stuff, I mean, there's usually a small sample of people, and then they push that out. These stats apply to this many more people, but that's a huge sampling of people. In terms of that survey, I'm interested to see what to you stood out the most, or what surprised you the most as it came to kind of the results of that survey.
Well, I think there's a number of things that stood out to me. I think one of the things was how many people, as a percentage, were actually feeling very stalled in their faith. They could have been any point along the way of their spiritual maturity, but they come to a place where they stalled. And at any given moment, on the average, there's about 20% of your people in your church, maybe some churches more, some churches a little less, that feel like that they're completely stalled out. And it can happen at any point along the way. And I think the other thing that surprised me is that in order to get out of the stall, that certain catalytic decisions need to be made, and that you just can't keep doing the same old and expect that you are going to grow just as you have done in the past. Something different needs to be done. Some different decisions need to be made. And that every point along the way in that spiritual continuum, there are different decisions that are more catalytic. And so that surprised me. And I think another thing that surprised me is that we hang a lot of weight on the importance of a Sunday service. And for a person who is less mature, Sunday services are very catalytic, very important. But as a person becomes more and more Christ-centered, the Sunday service becomes less important in their spiritual growth. So that surprised me. Those are some things.
Yeah. That's, I think, one of the hardest things is you'll get to a spot and something worked for you in the past. Hey, I'm going to implement a reading plan, or hey, I'm going to start to do some prayer walks or something like that. And they really excel you to the next point. And then maybe a year later or something of trying to do those things, you find yourself stuck. It's hard to find a new thing to do. It's hard to change when something worked for you in the past. So yeah, it makes sense, but it is surprising.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah, it reminds me of a podcast I was listening to between Andrew Huberman and David Goggins, and they were talking about like brain chemistry. I don't know anything about neuroscience or anything like that, but they're talking about this part of the brain that there's been like new science coming out that they've been studying, and it's related to willpower and like growing your willpower and doing things that you don't want to do for like 3 hours a week will like immeasurably grow your willpower and your will to do things. But those things that you don't want to do change because eventually you like to do them. Like, right, if you start working out, you don't like working out. Eventually you start to like working out as you're doing it. So you need to find something else to keep growing that willpower.
So like having the willpower to even listen to a 3-hour Huberman podcast.
Yeah, like that. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I just listened to the one part.
Yeah, and I'll just go on the record and say I will never like working out. So we'll just put that out there now.
That can
Hey, you
change.
never know.
That can change.
You never
There
know.
are some unwritten things that just never change, and
Yeah.
that's one of them for sure. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. One thing I was also kind of curious about in this study was how they measured spiritual growth, because it seems like such a arbitrary thing. You know, like how do you define who is spiritually mature, who's not spiritually mature,
for
how
sure.
you're growing?
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think we got to admit that a survey is going to be a little limited. I mean, listen, how do you take an X-ray of somebody's heart to see how big their heart is, so to speak? Do they have the two greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself? How do you measure that? How do you measure the size of and the quality of somebody's love for God and love for somebody else? So a survey is going to be a little bit limited on that, but there were some reasonable assumptions that were made. Even though it has limitations, there were some reasonable assumptions made in 4 key areas that the survey looked into. First was core attitudes and beliefs. There are a set of convictions that drive us forward, like how personal is God to us, or like how much do I really believe in the authority of the Bible, or grace? How much do I really understand grace and how much it changes me? So there was questions along that line that measures a person's strength of their convictions and their beliefs in these areas. And then secondly, there are participating in organized church activities. And while we know that the local church, according to the Bible, is God's plan for growing people, and that the local church has responsibilities. Pastors have responsibilities of providing a certain set of spiritual activities and experiences for the church. Well, if you're participating in them or not, you'll probably grow more than if you're not. And then thirdly, there are personal spiritual practices, and that's what we kind of emphasized during this particular series, are the personal spiritual, having a quiet time, reading your Bible, praying. And one thing it was found out in the survey, which is not really a big surprise, but that reflection on the Bible is a powerful catalytic experience for everybody along that spiritual continuum, And then the fourth area is spiritual activities with others. What kind of friendships do I have? Am I involved in evangelism? Do I have a spiritual mentor? Am I serving people in need on my own? And so those four areas are assessed, and then you have to kind of count on that people are being completely honest with their responses.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it'd be interesting to zero in on kind of some of the things that were covered in this survey and in the series that we did here at Hometown, and how we have implemented some of these changes, some of these things that we've talked about. And we can start with, like you said, reading the Bible, reflection on the Word. What are your Bible reading habits? I'd love to hear, and kind of what advice would you give to people who are maybe trying to take a next step or trying to get started or what have you?
I think that the biggest challenge we all face, including myself, is the tyranny of the urgent, right?
Yeah.
We're busy and we have commitments and our schedules are packed. We've got kids that we have to raise and spouses that we should talk to and work that we got to go to.
Right.
And we're spinning all these plates. It's so ironic that in modern day America that we got so many time-saving techniques and time-saving gadgets. And we only work 40 hours a week on average, plus some commute time. Take a couple hundred years ago, people are probably working 70, 80, maybe more, a lot more it takes to live a life. But golly, why are we so busy? We're spinning so many plates, it seems. That's the biggest challenge that we face with incorporating these disciplines, and we just cannot bow to the tyranny of the urgent. Something has got to change. And, probably the biggest thing I would suggest and encourage here is we're not going to grow if our quiet times are meager and squeezed, and it's like little devotionals that we do while we're on the toilet. It's got to go beyond that. And I know that during the week we don't have so much time. But that one practice that I mentioned in my message about solitude was such a big deal for me, that every once in a while, once a week, once every 2 weeks, that we take a longer time with God and learn how to really interact with God, really learn what it means to script our prayers after the Psalms, learn really what it means to worship God and focus in on Him, and to create space in our life so that our inner life is really able to sustain our outer life. And I think what's happened is, for so many people, it's the other way around. Our inner life is not being sustained. Outer life is not being sustained by inner life, and so we're succumbing to stress and anxiety and wrestling with our personal failures or whatever it might be, and we're buckling.
Yeah.
So, boy, if there's one thing I think everybody, no matter how busy they are, could find space in their schedule once a week, once every 2 weeks or something like that, and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to spend 2 hours with God, and that 2 hours will shape all the rest of your times, even though you might feel like you're on the clock.
Yeah, that's great. So what I'm hearing you say is, for sure, we need to make room. Even just throughout the week, we get so jam-packed. We need to make room, but specifically have some set times once a week, once every other week, to where we can really dive into, where we cut out the distractions and we consecrate that time to the Lord. We say, this is your time, and I'm going to spend some extensive time, maybe go out, maybe do something, find a place away from the kids somehow, and get that time going. Is that?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know it's hard, and it's got to be pre-decided in advance. And I think this is a part of maybe a little bit what it means for us to pick up our cross, right? It is going to go against the grain. It is going to be hard. But Jesus never promised us a easy path. I mean, why did He use that phrase or that metaphor of picking up your cross and follow me. You must deny yourself and pick up your cross and follow me. Well, part of that is going to be on our tough decisions that we're going to have to make to get involved in some of these spiritual disciplines. Not only for us personally, but it's picking up a cross to get involved with other people. It's picking up our cross to get involved with church activities, the whole bit. And it's not easy, especially in the context of our busy life. I get it. But I don't want to hear anymore people saying I'm too busy.
Yeah.
I get the challenge.
Yeah.
But we have to make tough decisions.
Yeah. 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 You got to make room. You got to clear stuff out
to
make room for the important stuff.
Right.
Yeah. And I will say this is something that we've done on occasion to where we'll kind of I'll give some room to Rose, my wife, so she can go have some extended time just on her own with really no time limits. And she'll make some room for me. It takes the whole family getting on board. And what it does, is it kind of helps your kids to see, oh, this must be kind of important, and which is awesome.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. How will your kids know that God's number one in your life unless you're demonstrating it and they're seeing it visibly?
Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing more hurtful, harmful than to say it and not display it.
Right.
I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but that
worked
out really well.
That was memorable.
So T-shirts will be coming.
I'm going to have to use that on a PowerPoint slide.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Maybe we need to be making time for it. We need to be intentional about making time for it. But maybe what would you say to the person who is just committed to making the time, but every time they open up the Word, they don't really know where to go. They don't know what they're doing. They feel overwhelmed because the reality is, right, this is ancient text from a different culture across the world in a completely different time, and it's hard to get into. It's hard to read. What advice would you give to that person?
Well, I think it's mostly the matter of the heart. Mm-hmm. I mentioned in the message about how I would finally clear out my schedule, make it to that classroom at Iowa State University, open up my Bible, and nothing happened. It was the hardship that you just described there, but some of it was understanding the Bible. Most of it, my heart was just callous, and it just wasn't pliable enough to feel like I was even connecting with God, and that was really the major hurdle. And that's somewhere along the line. I don't know if I heard it in a message from a pastor at church or whatever, but is when I learned that the Psalms were written for a particular purpose, to be kind of a prayer book, a prayer guide, so to speak, to help us script our prayers and connect with God. And that's what I began to do. I just started. Even though everything inside of me was going one way, I would just say, hey, I got to use this psalm. I'm going to use it to script my prayers. And I would. Now, there are some psalms that are difficult to understand, as David sits there and says, kill my enemies, I thought I was supposed to love my enemies.
It's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, well, study guides. Especially simple ones, because if you're really if your goal is to engage with God, you don't want to get bogged down, but you do need understanding. But the biggest thing was I used the Psalms to script my prayers until I feel like I was really starting to connect with God, and that I understood that I needed to come into his courts with thanksgiving in my heart and into his courts with praise. That the focus was praising, worshiping, focusing on God rather than on me. I came with my thanksgiving and worship prompted by what the Psalms were saying, and rather than coming first with all my requests. It was a matter of being whether I was going to be God-centered or me-centered.
Sure.
And then after a while, my heart would warm up and I'd start yielding, and, it got to a place where I was confessing sin. Sometimes there's this sin that's there that needs to be confessed, and yielding and surrendering to God. Oh, God, search my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there be any hurtful way in me. And, you got to yield. Sometimes God wants to finger the sin before he wants to go on to something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I found too, in my own Bible reading, once I transitioned from what do you want me to do, I'll read to find out what God wants me to do, to I'll read to find out more about him and to get to know him better, and kind of treating it that way. There was a lot of heart growth and a lot of change to where I felt like we were connecting more intimately, which what to do kind of just flows naturally out of that, right? As we get to love somebody, as I love my wife, as I get to know her better, I'm going to do stuff that she likes because I like her a lot, And the same is true, in my quiet times as I'm reading to try to say, what does this passage say about the Lord and who he is and how I can approach him then in worship through that. Everything else kind of falls into place. And so, that really transformed at least my quiet time. Reading plans help a bunch too.
Yeah.
If I think for a new person, finding structure, some sort of structure is key. Oftentimes people open up to Genesis 1 and they're like, oh man, this is tough. Once you get to Leviticus, I love Leviticus.
Start talking about purity
You were
rituals.
so weird.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. But a Bible reading plan that can give you both Old Testament and New Testament to kind of get the whole grand picture really helps. And there's so many out there.
Yeah.
The 1-year Bible. There's lots of 1-year reading plans that can seem a little daunting at first. Like 5 chapters of this, 5 chapters of that, one of this, one of that. But finding a good place to start is something I'd recommend.
Yeah.
Through a plan.
Yeah, I think that was something that was really transformational for me, was finding structure, having resources around me, study guides, videos online. We live in a day and age where you can go look up any book of the Bible and there's an explainer video on the entire thing of what it's about and all that side. So using the resources that are free and available to you and around you, and seeing that it was one big story, all about God, and that's the primary focus, right? It's an act of sacrifice to spend my time and just sit here and say, this isn't about me right now. This is about just learning and absorbing you and knowing who you are, and approaching it a little bit with that perspective was something that was just transformational for me. But maybe we transition this into a little bit of talking about just prayer. You kind of talked about a little bit with praying through Psalms. Be interested to hear just kind of what are your prayer practices, if it's just praying through Psalms, or if you have other prayer practices that you try to implement on a regular basis.
My emphasis is jumpstarting worship, Thanksgiving with the Psalms.
Yeah.
That is just foundational. I will have other things that I'll do. Lately I have been impressed by my need as an intercessor. We have Jesus and the Holy Spirit actively interceding for us right now. If I'm going to be Jesus-like, then I will be interceding for other people, stepping in between God and people, which is what, in a sense, priests do, right? And we are called to be holy priests. This is one of our great privileges, is to pray for people, to step between them and God. And so I'll pray for people a lot. And I usually use the prayers of Paul to do that, because part of what you ask yourself when you're praying is, well, what should I be praying for people? What would be ultimately the most important? There's so many things we could pray for people, but I think Paul chose in his prayers some of the greatest things that you could pray for people. So I've got a whole sheet of all the prayers of Paul.
That's a good
And
idea.
I use that a lot of times on how that shapes my prayers for people. And then, of course, I pray about whatever I'm going to do today. I prayed for this podcast today.
Yes.
On my way over and in my quiet time today. Whatever is what I'm going to be doing today. God, your life through me for your glory. And I know what God's will is for me today, I think. And that's what I'll pray through.
We should totally make those prayers of Paul available, like a sheet of them somewhere. That would be really awesome.
That would be cool.
So if you could just get that to us next 20, 30 minutes or so, that'd be helpful. We can put
Okay,
it
I'll
out
be
there.
right on it.
Yeah, awesome. One other thing, I can't remember who I learned this from. I think somehow it came through Mark Bowen to some other person, but we'd do the Psalm of the day, and then you'd add 30, and then you'd read that Psalm, and then you'd add 30, and you read, and somewhere along the line, one of those Psalms will probably match up with something that's going on in your heart. And then you can kind of camp in on that. Did he get that from you? You're smiling at me.
No, my wife does that.
Oh, yeah.
But that's too psalm-centric for me. That's too much. I only
Sure.
do one chapter.
Yeah.
One psalm, and then I just get going from there and to do 5. Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, well,
know.
you kind of breeze through. You're like, no, this isn't me today. This is where I'm at, and then you go to the next one. So you're kind of letting God connect with you with one of those things, and sometimes it ends up being your whole quiet time. To be fair, but it's really helped me a lot to kind of center the prayers on really what's important, and sometimes I'm not quite sure what's important when I start out. So going through those Psalms, well, oh wow, yeah, that's exactly where I'm at right now, and we need to work through this, Lord. Let's talk about it. It's never killing my enemies, though, thankfully.
Yeah. You don't want to break anyone's teeth? Or
Yeah,
anything?
no, yeah. Yep, not yet.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think for me, similar to reading the Bible, it was finding structure, and it would structure through Psalms, structure through following some of Paul's prayers, and something that I've been implementing recently is following a 3 prayer a day structure, where I start with the Lord's Prayer that Jesus teaches in Luke 11 and Matthew 6. And following that structure to start my day of kind of like recognizing who God is, recognizing who I am, setting myself up on that path, and then taking a break in the middle of the day to do some intercessory prayer. I have a list of people that I pray for. I have different topics that I pray for, and just working through that, kind of taking a break from whatever I'm doing for the day and just sitting down praying for those people, and then finishing the day with like a reflective, thank you God for this, thank you for this, going back just through my day, everything that I can think of, that I can thank Him for. And that's been huge for me personally, of just like developing that structure of prayer and always having it somewhere in the day where I'm coming back to that.
So you're kind of like a Daniel guy,
Yeah.
three times a day.
Yeah, I read a book this summer or last summer on prayer. That's where I got the idea from, and he brings in Daniel of showing that 3 times a day thing, and that was a thing that was just very prominent in Jewish culture. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew a guy back in Iowa State who was a professor, who was a believer, was always wrestling with how can I spend more time with God, and he would just set an alarm right in the middle of his day that he would just take a break from all his work, and then he would seek God for 5 minutes right in the middle of his day, just so he was always on the track of busy with his work, and at the end of the day thinking, oh, this is the first time I thought about God for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, keeps them top of mind, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it kind of comes back to what you said earlier about bowing to the tyranny of busy, right? And like with Daniel, the thing that he was told about too was the statue, and he decided to defy it and keep on praying like he was always doing, right? So it's are we going to bow to busy, or are we going to say no, take some time and sit down and pray?
Right.
Yeah. Bow to the Lord, which is the great commandment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, we should do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, okay, so transitioning, I guess, kind of into some other disciplines, one thing we talked about through the series was generosity. And I'd like to get your perspective on it. I mean, I spoke a little bit about it, but I'd like to get your opinion on kind of why you think it's so important, why you think it was one of those key catalytic changes or events, kind of hearkening back to that survey, and then maybe how you might advise for people to create some margin to be more generous. Not that you're giving financial advice, but kind of maybe what you've done, kind of give us a picture into that discipline.
I think generosity is a big deal, and usually when we think of generosity, we think in terms of money, but it's far bigger, far broader than that. I think what it does is it represents a shift a shift in your outlook. You're shifting you're shifting from being me-centric, self-centric, and you're shifting to being other-centric, God-centric. One of the chief characteristics of God himself is that he was generous. I mean, gee whiz, he gave his only son, right? God is extremely generous. If we're going to be like God, we will be generous. And so there's a shifting that goes when our relationship with God seems to be all about us, to where, hey, I'm going to be about God. I'm going to be about other people. So that's generosity. I think reflects that. I think it also forces a person, especially when they're taking really first big practical steps in generosity by the use of their money, by the use of their time, whatever. I think it forces you to really be serious about certain promises in the Bible. Do I really believe these promises or do I not? Is God going to take care of me if I'm generous? Is God going to bless me if I'm going to be generous? Even if I step into being in greater need, is he going to make up for the time that I gave him? Is he going to help me financially, or however you express your word? We've got fears with generosity. We get a scarcity mentality. And is God going to help us with that, or is he not? And I think this is one of the easiest, maybe first ways that we can experience God in our life is this: if we take steps of faith with our generosity and see what God does.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and I think why it's such a catalytic event is because it requires faith. You'll never grow. I'm of the mind, this might be a strong statement, but I don't know how a person can grow in their relationship with the Lord without faith, right? I mean, without faith, we got nothing, So it takes acts of faith, a person being brought beyond their own capability to really grow, because what they do is they see that God is faithful. They see that, wow, God, you do take care of me, even if it's not exactly in the ways I expect or hope even, you do take care of me in ways that are far beyond what I could imagine. I mean, that's for Roseanne and I mean, very well, there was a few months there in this last year that were really difficult for us financially. My business started slowing down and all this stuff started happening, but we made the commitment to keep our regular giving. And God just did kind of hilariously obvious God glory moments of meeting financial needs. It was, something would happen. We'd just have to laugh, and then we'd cry, and then we'd laugh again that we cried, all this stuff. But God is just so faithful. But what it did was it stretched our hearts to say, well, we're going to do this. We'd sure like to not do it. I'd sure like to hold on to that. But in our hearts, God grew a lot bigger, and we were seeing needs met and all these things happen. So, yeah, generosity for us has required, I will say it required more faith in the beginning, and it just became easier and easier because you see what God does with it, with your own heart, with other people, how it meets needs. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. I feel like it's always so hard to talk about generosity, especially from the stage. Just because it's so people are so weird about it, and then it's just like it's so easy to come across as like the church is just asking for money. The church just wants money. It's just
we're self-serving when we
and so what I really appreciated about your message when you were talking about it was that it was you brought it to generosity in everything, right? We always focus on it as just money, which is a huge part of it, right? That's the thing that we try to hold on to the most out of everything that we can be generous with. But it's really just, you're supposed to live a life of constant generosity in everything, in your time and your efforts and your talents and in your money and keep growing in that and keep giving in that. So I thought that was really good.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad. Yeah. I mean, it's challenging. It's a muscle. Going back to how much I dislike the gym, it's a muscle that you have to work on and you have to flex. But once you do, I think I'm going to admit to liking it. But when,
Yeah.
once you do, you start to appreciate it. You start to see how you fit into the kingdom of God, which, if we're talking about growth, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
It's fulfilling a role, Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, well, maybe let's go into the last topic here.
Yeah.
Talking about community and serving, getting involved with the church, and just why that's something that's so important for us as this kind of like last catalytic event that we talk about. Why is that something that's so important, and where can people go that are looking for those things, so for community and for opportunities to serve?
I think the importance of community is a little like generosity because it tests your interest on being generous of spirit with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to engage, or are you going to seek being by yourself? And there are so many people that would just like, I want my life to be on my own terms, in my own way, with my own Netflix, sitting at home, and it's costly to engage with other people, and so it's another step of faith to say, you know what, I'm going to do what's uncomfortable for me at first and engage with people, but not just on a superficial level, but I'm going to engage with people with all of my heart and seek to go deeper and to seek to establish true friendships. Solomon warns us that the companion of fools suffers harm, right? I mean, who we decide to be friends with influences us greatly. So if we're with our greatest friends or with godly people, it's going to influence us one direction. But if our friends, even if it's friends on TV, is going to influence us in a different direction. And there's so many of these commands in the New Testament called the one another commands, that we're to do things with one another, encourage one another, admonish one another, pray for one another, bear one another's burdens. It's describing a quality of relationship that unfortunately so many people, maybe even a lot of Christians, don't have. But God wants to get us to a point where we're saying to a group of people, these are my people. These are my people. And and it's extremely important on whether we're growing or not.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the community, coming back to the local church, the importance of the local church, it's kind of everything. When people come to a Sunday service and that's their primary or only discipline, a lot of times it's kind of coming to consume a thing and then go home. But when people are coming to build that community, to find needs, to be that intercessor, to do those different things, I mean, that's when growth happens, right? I mean, the greatest command, right? Love God and then love others. I mean, it's pretty important. And
we got to quickly admit that on a Sunday service, that's going to be extremely limited.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
right.
It's great you can be friendly for 15 or 20 minutes after a service on Sunday, but frankly, we got to get in small groups.
Yeah.
Right?
Where
it's life on life. And then when we're involved in a small group, we're really saying to ourselves when we're going, I am going to go there to give. These are my people. These are my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make this a focus and importance in my life. I've been in small groups where things have gone great. I've been in small groups where things have not been so good. And partly is because some folks have looked at that small group, oh, this is just another meeting I got to go to, as opposed to these are my people that I am going to grow with.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. I think kind of piggybacking off that, what I find so interesting here is community is kind of the thing that's needed to do all the things that we've talked about today well, right? If reading the Bible, reading it in community is going to grow you way more than just trying to read it and do it on your own, right? Prayer in community is going to grow you way more than just praying on your own. You can't do generosity by yourself, right? You need someone to be generous with. And so, yeah, I thought of Ephesians chapter 3, verse 18, where in one of Paul's prayers, where he says, may you have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God, right? Like, we need community if we want to understand God to his fullest. Mm-hmm. God is so multidimensional in his love that one person from one perspective, from one life experience, can't comprehend the extent of it by themselves. They need community. They need people to know God well and to represent him well, right? Because God is himself a relational being through the Trinity, and we're created in his image as relational beings, male and female. We image God. So the importance of just needing people to do what we're supposed to do well.
Yeah, and that doesn't fit real well with Western culture, which is so individualistic.
Yeah.
Individualism is valued in Western culture, as opposed to Eastern culture, which is they understand community a lot better.
Yeah.
We have put a lot of pressure on ourselves, thinking that I got to be me and I'm measured by what I do, as opposed to I identify with who I associate with, my community.
Yeah.
Boy, and that can really speak to how busy we are, right?
Well, there you go. Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, it also makes me think of Jesus, how willing to be interrupted he was, how in community he was. I mean, he was always in community, except when he was finding those times to find the solitude, to get away, to talk to his Father. But, the same is true with small group, right? I mean, your small group's going to be good. It has potential to be really good. But when you take the extra time to meet people's needs, to be your car broke down, you're moving, which is something that I'm a little familiar with. We had tons of people come to our house, for small group. I mean, we to help us to move, people from our small group, and it blessed us richly. There was relationship, there was serving. Those people were being Christ to me, and that it grows your faith. It helps with everything. So yeah, I mean, that picture that we have from Jesus to be interruptible, which should also kind of take place on a Sunday morning. Maybe I'm not just going to go to the people I'm really comfortable with, or maybe I'm not just going to zoom out of here, whatever, to get home. I'm going to be available like Christ was. I think that's really important too.
Did I miss your move?
Yeah. But there's still plenty of work to be done, Brent, so you can help.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I think in regards to all this stuff, especially like community and serving, if you're looking for an opportunity for that, we have the website, which has opportunities for serving. We have small groups that you can get connected with. We've got, I think we still have the Dave Ramsey thing available for people who are looking to get into generosity. Just wanted to plug that real quick. But yeah, I think, thank you so much for joining us today, Brent. I thought it was a wonderful conversation. You're a wonderful guest to have on. Yeah.
Hey, that's the nicest thing anybody said to me all day long.
Well, you're welcome.
Early days. Yeah.
Cool. And and thank you guys all for joining us out there. Of course, this podcast is only going to go as far as you all, the listeners, will take it. So if you have any input, questions, topics that you'd be interested in hearing about, or guests that you'd like us to have on, you can contact us. We got our contact information in the show notes, wherever that might be. If you're listening to us on an audio format, just know that we also have a video format on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, we have an audio format. If that'd make it easier for you to listen to, if you want to listen to us on your way into the office or whatever that might be. But for now, that's all we got for you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.